Here?
Okay, right here.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm back, and I'm happy to have Congressman Brady here. The one thing I'm going to resist is I'm not going to say powerful House Ways and Means Committee. It's like one word.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Oh, I can.
I'm really
Okay.
good with
Yes,
that.
this is the powerful chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, and he sits really at the red-hot universe of the center of the universe of what we care about, each of us, almost equally, which is taxes. So we've had Rand Paul take a chainsaw and a wood chipper to the tax code, and we've had Ted Cruz he's getting headlines for the very seductive notion of abolishing the IRS and putting your taxes on a postcard. And since we're still smarting from April 15th, that's very appealing. So why couldn't we have abolished the tax code and have three flat rates, and be done with it and get incentives for home mortgages or charity someplace, get incentives someplace else, and just make the tax code the tax code?
Yeah, I think we can dramatically simplify the code we have today. I think we can dramatically make it more flat and a lot more fair. I think that's the main challenge most people have, is the tax code that's absolutely so complex no one can understand it, from the average family to the most ardent tax follower. And so what we're looking to do in the House is to create a tax code that's built for growth. We want a code that's built for the growth of families' paychecks, for the growth of local businesses, and the growth of the U.S. economy, because we think that really drives so much job creation in the United States and where we want to go. And so this year is really all about laying the foundation for 2017 and comprehensive tax reform.
So you're not a Twitterer. You're not a tweaker.
Thank you
Excuse
for
me.
saying
He could be a Twitterer for all I know.
It
A
came out
tweeter.
all wrong, I think, on that.
You're not a tweeter, but you're also not a tweaker of the tax code. You want to do big things, as I understand it.
Yeah, look, we're not going to, tax reform happens once a generation. So we're not going to tweak a few things and call it a day. And what we do has to last and keep us competitive for a generation, for 30 years. So the challenge I've laid out for our Ways and Means Committee is to think bold and think fresh. Think bold from sort of the standpoint, I've adopted Steve Jobs' approach. When he came back to Apple to revitalize that company, he took a look at their competitive products. The challenge he laid out for his key people were, look, when you're behind, leapfrog. In other words, when you're behind, don't do all the hard work to get to the middle of the pack. Do the hard work to get to the lead of the pack. And so that's the challenge I've laid out for our Ways and Means Committee. And think fresh is from the standpoint of we want to grow. This is what we're after. And so we're taking a hard look at a number of different ideas, from consumption taxes, flat taxes, to cash flow taxes, to a number of those areas. I want my committee exploring the most pro-growth provisions of all of these ideas. And what we expect to do is to lay out later this summer a comprehensive blueprint on where we want the tax code to go, with a number of details, and also sort of laying out how we think we can get there.
So you're a leapfrogger.
I am a leapfrogger. Okay.
Good enough. But let's go in the Wayback Machine for a second to Dave Camp.
Yeah.
And he put out a proposal, and John Boehner said about it, oh, blah, blah, blah. And it lasted for about 5 minutes. How are you going to be different?
Yeah, two thoughts. One, the work that
He's the former chair.
Yeah. What Dave Camp did makes tax reform inevitable from this standpoint. He took the concept of lowering rates and broadening the base and simplifying the code and being more competitive globally and growing the economy, and proved you could do it with the tightest political constraints possible, and proved you could do that. And the challenge, as he laid it down, was now make it even more pro-growth than this. That's one issue. Secondly, Speaker Ryan is giving us a green light on bold pro-growth tax reform. Frankly, we can't deliver it fast enough for this new speaker. Yeah. Now, we know we're going to need, and to make a point, historically, how many of you were here for the Reagan tax process? Okay, a few. So you know the elements that made that possible. One, you had a public that had enough. They were fed up. The code was too complex. The it seemed like everyone was getting a tax break but themselves. Sounds familiar. That's the second one is you had members of Congress laying out their ideas on tax reform. Then Jack Kemp and Bill Bradley. Today, you see the Dave Camp draft, the Devin Nunes ABC, the Burgess flat tax, Woodall Fair. So that element's present. The third element was presidential leadership. And that's what we're going to need in 2017, and that's what we're geared to be ready to deliver for.
Well, you get me where I want to go, which is the presidential candidate tax proposals usually end up putting us into debt. What do you think of those proposals?
Well, I think the encouraging news is every serious candidate has developed a serious tax reform plan. All of them have pro-growth elements in there that we ought to take a hard look at. My view, one that tells me our candidates want to lead. This is going to be a top priority for them. I think that's the best news ever. On the revenue side of things, what I've said is that within dynamic scoring, real-life impacts of tax reform, I think we're going to stay revenue neutral within that dynamic space, which should give us what we need to deliver it. I do say there's one caveat. We're not going to leave growth on the table if we're a dime or two off, but I actually think that we can create a revenue neutral, strongly pro-growth tax reform that grows the economy.
So I have two questions out of that, which is the House is expected to remain Republican, although you never know. Tax reform needs to be bipartisan. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
And yet there's a great deal of distance between what the Democrats think, say the top rate should be, what Republicans think, and there's a lot of ground in there to come together. How are you going to do that?
It won't be easy. Tax reform isn't. At the end of the day, it will be bipartisan. Any change this major is going to have input and ideas from both parties. We already see a number that we have Democrats who believe our top rate's too high. There's no reason businesses competing around the world shouldn't be easily able to reinvest their dollars in the U.S. We see Democrats in support of expensing and some of these issues. And so we're going to build off sort of the common ground we have there. I don't expect tax reform to be bipartisan at every step in the process. But at the end of the day, if it's going to be signed into law by a president, it's going to have bipartisan ideas in there.
So I don't know if you notice I have on different glasses, so I actually can't see my questions. But let's say I'm a drug company, and I'll write prescriptions for anybody who has any maladies. And I'm going to move abroad because I don't like the taxes here. What do you say to those companies?
Two, I think we need, let's treat the root cause and not the symptoms. No one that I know favors inversions or want companies to move their headquarters or manufacturing or research overseas. But we have a tax code today that strongly incentivizes companies to either do that or they recognize they can't compete globally without making those decisions, or worse, they see themselves as an easy takeover target by a foreign company, so they act ahead of time to prevent themselves from happening. Or a business I talked to yesterday making a decision to headquarter domicile outside the United States and announcing today, what they see are a huge tax disadvantage over their competitors by staying here in the United States. So that, to me, the urgency is to act, and international tax is a key part of that. But secondly, I watched what's happened at Treasury, the rules on inversions. Look,
you didn't like those rules.
Well, look, I oppose inversions. Everyone does. But I think in their haste to build a tax wall to keep companies in, I think they may well have built a tax wall to keep investment out. And so the Ways and Means Committee is taking a hard look at those proposed rules to determine if they have not inadvertently hurt investment in jobs in the United States.
Well, it stopped the Pfizer-Allergan deal, did it not? Was that a good thing?
As a Band-Aid, it certainly disrupted a transaction, mid-transaction. But I certainly know it didn't solve the broader problem of why businesses, feel they have to look at these options.
But in the interim, do you see inversions slowed?
I think they tackled a couple of inversions. I don't think they stopped them. And because it didn't go the root cause, it may, in fact, and I hope this doesn't happen, companies may feel that rather than moving their headquarters overseas or their decision-making, that they ought to be moving their jobs and their manufacturing and their R&D overseas to avoid the tax code completely. So that would work against U.S. interests.
So I think it was Treasury Secretary Jack Lew who called those companies unpatriotic. What do you think of their motivation and their citizenship and
the closest thing?
Take one for your country and stay here?
And be acquired by a foreign company?
Well, no, but stay here and pay the taxes.
Lose that local job base because you can no longer compete being an American company. In that case, I think the closest thing to unpatriotic is the tax code we have right now. I just think we can do so much better than what we have, and not just keep those companies here. I want to draw investment and job creation from around the world. I don't want companies celebrating when they locate to a low-tax jurisdiction. I want them bragging that they're making these investments in the United States.
So Paul Ryan had your job. Now he's Speaker. But he hasn't really brought about the transformation that was hoped for, that gridlock would end, you'd get a budget and whatever. What do you make of the Ryan speakership so far?
Well, first, this was his dream job. It's my dream job now. My toughest task is to quit smiling when I'm around him because he's got
he's got the bad job.
Yeah, the toughest job there is. I think his leadership's been remarkable. Our conference has a lot of different ideas on how we go different directions. Generationally, he's a dramatically different speaker. He pushes power away from himself. He gives green light to the Ways and Means Committee on tax reform, on replacing the ACA, on welfare reform. Frankly, we can't bring him those solutions fast enough. Generationally, it's a huge change. The other thing I would note is that we look at issues. First, he delivered almost immediately on not just funding the government, but the first permanent tax cuts, $629 billion, that ended a problem that had been around for a decade or more, a huge accomplishment. He moved through the customs bill, again, another 6 or 8 year problem as well. And so, we are trying to work our way through the budget, but at the end of the day, this isn't Paul Ryan's budget. This is a Republican conference. It's our responsibility to find that budget that we can all support. So I think his leadership's tremendous, and especially from the Ways and Means Committee, we couldn't ask for a speaker who knows more about and is more convinced about what we need to do.
Grover Norquist has the famous tax pledge, which most of your members have signed. When the great Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma was leaving the Senate, he said that impeded a lot of good things that could be done. What do you make of that tax pledge? This is what members sign and say they'll never do anything that raises taxes.
Well, and I think the pledge really focuses on marginal rates for the most part, and there is no reason to raise the marginal rates. In the last 12 months, the federal government has generated more taxes per taxpayer from you than at any time since the government started recording that data. We really don't have a revenue problem. We have a huge spending problem. And I think the answer is spending cuts will get us halfway back to a balanced budget. We're going to need stronger economic growth to finish that job. That's why I think the focus we have on, so how do we create investment, new job opportunities, economic growth through tax reform, I think that's a key part of the solution.
Last question. Will there be tax reform if top rates are lowered? If Democrats insist on lowering the top rate and Republicans raising the top rate. Yes, I'm dyslexic.
No.
Raising, lowering.
Look, we come at this from different views. I'm convinced. I think Democrats see this perhaps as a way to generate more tax revenue through tax reform. We see more tax revenue through economic growth for the country. And so we're going to work hard to try to find that common ground. But it starts first with the majority in the House, and specifically the Ways and Means Committee, laying out our Built for Growth tax code, and then we'll work it from there.
Wasn't a yes or no, but was very interesting nonetheless. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, powerful Mr.
On the tax
Chairman
increases,
of
I'll
House
say
Ways and
no, but we'll go from there.
Okay, I thank you.
Thanks, Margaret.
Oh, wait, Steve Clemens with a question.
Hello, there we go. I know you have to leave, Congressman. I'm Steve Clemens with The Atlantic, and thank you for joining us. I just left Donald Trump just a few minutes ago, and I noticed that Grover Norquist did not jump out of his seat applauding at the pigs. And I went over to Grover and I said, what's the problem? And he said he hadn't signed the no tax pledge yet, or the not raising taxes. How much of a problem is that in your caucus if a Donald Trump candidacy came around? Will he have to sign the pledge to get it to get further along with your crowd?
If any president is willing to lead on tax reform and come to the table with us to create what I hope is a Built for Growth tax code, what they sign and what they don't sign is a bit ancillary to that. I know where the House wants to go on tax reform, and we're just looking for that missing element, a president who's willing to lead.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I have to go now and call Grover.
Thank you.
Margaret.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Great. Let's go that way.
Please welcome Neil Gabler, author of The Atlantic's May cover story, The Secret Shame of Middle Class America.